Is it possible to be anti-war and anti-nuclear annihilation, but also be equally anti-authoritarianism, especially against the kind that ends up killing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of its own people? There's an old saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. And while that statement rings true, it's not an immutable law of physics either. Wars are not unstoppable like the passage of time or the effects of gravity. We can avoid wars and save the lives of millions of people. However, sometimes the best way to avoid war is to kill the few people who are responsible for starting them, especially those who never fight the wars they begin. This is why sometimes we have to fight for peace. Sure, that sounds ironic and paradoxical, but the bottom line is, there's always some sadistic psychopath willing to make other people's lives a living hell in order to get what they want, especially if it means keeping absolute power. And there's no negotiating with these people. There's no reasoning, there's no finding a middle ground, and worse yet, there's no pleasing them ever. No one in their right mind wants World War III, and regime changes aren't a good idea either. But must we continue allowing the Putins of the world to get away with the murder of hundreds of thousands of people, many of which are their own? How and why do we continue allowing this to happen? And what does the fighting Irish leprechaun of Notre Dame have to do with any of this? For starters, I love this character, and I've always wanted to draw him with some depth and dimensionality. And what I really love about him is his old-timey bare-knuckle fighting stance and what that represents. This little guy willing to take on anyone twice his size because he refuses to back down to any bullies, and much less a murderous tyrant. And I'm not even Irish, and much less Ukrainian. My family is Cuban, actually. And it's precisely because my family fled a murderous communist dictatorship that managed to fool the world that it was like a Cuban David standing up to the American Goliath, when it was actually stepping on the lives of its own people for decades. This is why I know we need to stand up to the authoritarian tyranny that is the Kremlin led by Putin. By the way, I want peace, especially considering I'm 50 years old and it's not like I'm battle hardened either. And I'm sure even if I ended up on the battlefield, I'd be killed for something as stupid as following the wrong instructions within the first week. This is why I totally understand and side with the current anti-war movement that is taking shape now here in the United States. However, as anti-war as I want to be and as alive as I'd like to remain, I think I'm more anti-authoritarian, anti-tyranny, and anti-oppression, especially by the likes of warmongers like Putin and his inner circle of evil that must be stopped. And I would rather die fighting than to live under the thumb of the same ilk of tyrant that my family risked their lives to flee from in the first place. And especially an aging, narcissistic, beady-eyed dictator like Putin who is no ideologue and much less a historian. All he cares about is staying in power and not ending up like other dictators of the past such as Mussolini of Italy, Nicolae Ceausescu of Romania, or Muammar Gaddafi from Libya. This idea that Putin is just trying to unite the Russian people and restore their glory of the past is bullshit. This man would kill his own daughters with his bare hands if that's what it took to stay in power. You don't need to be a historian or a psychologist or even a mind reader to know his intentions. Putin's actions speak much louder than any of his words ever have since he was put into an undeserved position of power by a drunken Boris Yeltsin. I wish I knew the answer to stopping this walking, talking societal tumor without having to kill hundreds of thousands of people, and much less the majority of humanity with nuclear annihilation. But if we don't stop them now, it really can get worse. And it's not just baseless fear-mongering to think that the Kremlin and the Chinese Communist Party and the Assad regime of Syria, along with the Kim regime of North Korea or the mullahs of Iran, and even a banana republic regime like the Castros in Cuba, aren't a threat to the peace and freedoms of most of humanity. By the way, it's thanks to these regimes why we have the immigration crises that we have throughout the world every time millions of their people are displaced thanks to their despotic whims. That's why it's very naive to think that this is all just morally relative. That who are we to tell others how to run their nations? How many more Vietnams and Iraqs do we need to interfere and meddle in? Who are we to think that we're right and they're wrong? Actually, there is a way to tell. And it's usually through the needless, avoidable suffering that these regimes put their own people through, which Western democratic nations with free market economies do not. The simple fact that we can question and protest the United States and NATO's involvement, but the opposite is far from true in these nations, should tell you all you need to know why this war isn't simply about saving Ukraine and much less virtue signaling for its survival. How can we end this irrefutable humanitarian crisis without killing more people than we're trying to save? If I knew the answer, I'd be drawing up those plans instead of this leprechaun. Many people wonder if World War III has already begun. What seems to be undeniable is that the United States and NATO are already in a proxy war with Russia and even some of its allies. For all the foreign policy blunders and mishaps that can be blamed on the United States and NATO, it ultimately was Putin and the Kremlin that started this war. I don't even want to say Russia itself, because it's clear many Russian people are against this war, but are understandably afraid to speak out. And this is what we need to fight against. This deliberate authoritarian invasion on the part of Putin and any other rogue regimes backing him up. Regimes made up of other like-minded, power-hungry, sadistic psychopaths who have no regard whatsoever for human life and are willing to create as much suffering as necessary to remain in power. I believe that if humanity survives this, which it will, there will come a future where we will finally be rid of such tyrants the way we have managed to rid ourselves of divine pharaohs and monarchs of the past that managed to rule as though they were actual gods on earth. I just hope it doesn't take another 1,000 years to see that peaceful and harmonious future where we have come as close to equality throughout our species as possible. But the sad and unavoidable truth is, people like Putin will not allow that to happen without a fight. If I got anything wrong in this video, let me know in the comments below. But if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for upcoming videos, and check out the links below for my original art and merchandise. And thanks for watching.